Mass Effect Legendary Edition is now out, and many of you have already started on your new journey as Commander Shepard with the legendary Crew of the Normandy. But as you progress into the later stages of Mass Effect 1 and into ME2 and 3, you've probably started to notice that difficulty curve ramping up as enemies and levels get harder. That's why today we're back to take a look at 6 more tips that you need to know in order to master Mass Effect Legendary Edition. If you haven't already, check out the first video on this topic for good beginner to intermediate level tips. This video will focus on intermediate to slightly advanced tips and will primarily be aimed at Mass Effect 1's mid to late game, with some commentary on how things change in ME2 and 3. But don't worry, if you're just starting out or thinking about buying the game, these tips will absolutely help you out if you're just jumping in. And speaking of jumping in, let's start with tip number 1. 1. Equipment upgrades are just as important as the equipment itself. In Mass Effect 1, you can use upgrades to boost the effectiveness of your armor, weapons, grenades, and even to change your ammo type. There's a huge variety of options, everything from making your armor more resistant to damage, increasing your weapon damage, adding incendiary or cryo damage to your grenades, etc. And while early on this might seem like a small nice-to-have addition, in late game and on harder difficulty levels, these add-ons are must-have. In particular, upgrades to your armor can add massive advantages. The shield modulator upgrade, for example, will add extra shields, sometimes over 100 points of extra shields. To put that in context, some mid-level light armors in the game only come with 150 to 200 points of shield protection to start, so in some cases you're nearly doubling overall shield strength with the right add-on. Other upgrades can increase your ability cooldowns by double-digit percentages, such as the kinetic buffer, which also adds the benefit of improving your mobile accuracy, a great upgrade for vanguards or other aggressive playstyles. And weapon upgrades are no less potent. There's the standard effects you'd expect, like a rail extension upgrade that adds more overall damage, but there are also more specialized upgrades like a combat scanner that makes it harder for enemies to scramble your minimap radar, or a kinetic stabilizer that reduces recoil. High-level guns can also slot 2 upgrades, which means that you can create a combo such as a rail extension and heatsink. Rail extensions add more damage to your weapon but increase their heat generation, which reduces your overall effective rate of fire. But with a heatsink in your second upgrade slot, you can negate most or all of that extra heat, getting a penalty-free boost to damage. Grenades can be modified to have fire or cold damage, extra radius and overall damage, partially bypass shields, and more. You can also use a variety of different ammo types to boost effectiveness against synthetic enemies like Geth, or anti-personnel rounds to target organic enemies specifically, and much, much more. In fact, while we're talking about ammo types, let's jump to tip number 2. 2. Switch ammo types for the situation. In all 3 games, you have the ability to use special ammo types for bonus effects and sometimes an extra advantage against a particular enemy type. In ME2 and 3, switching ammo types is made easy by adding special ammo types to your power wheel, but in ME1, you have to go into your inventory screen, select your weapon, open up upgrades, and select the ammo upgrade that you want to use. It takes several seconds to do this for each squad mate, and that can become a chore quickly. However, especially in Mass Effect 1, these special ammo types can really make a difference. Even the low-level ammo upgrades add double-digit percentage boost to your damage depending on the situation. Anti-personnel and shredder rounds can add upwards of 35% extra damage against organics at higher levels, and armor-piercing or tungsten rounds can do the same for synthetic enemies like mechs and Geth. In ME1, you also have some really fun options like hammerhead rounds that add a significant boost to force impact when firing, greatly increasing the chance of knocking enemies backwards and off their feet. Combined with a shotgun or sniper rifle, this can be a fun way to litter the battlefield with the crumpled debris of staggered enemies. Even more overpowered than the hammerhead rounds are the high explosive rounds, a rare ammo type that adds way more damage and explosive force to each shot that you take, but also adds a huge amount of generated heat to each shot, meaning your weapon will overheat almost right away, if not instantly on each shot. It's a big trade-off if you're using high explosive rounds by themselves, but if you take tip number 1 and combine it with this tip, you can do something really special. There are weapon upgrades called frictionless materials that greatly reduce heat generation from your weapons, and if you have a high level weapon that can slot 2 upgrades instead of just 1, you can double up on frictionless material mods and significantly negate the overheating side effect of high explosive rounds. Alternatively, if you're not worried about having to wait for your weapons to cool down or switching to a backup weapon frequently and you want to simply go for the highest possible damage output, install 2 high-level rail extension or scram rail upgrades onto a high-level sniper rifle plus high explosive rounds, and have fun blasting enemies into hot smoldering piles of atoms as you become a walking mass accelerator cannon. If you combine high explosive rounds with the carnage ability for shotguns or the overkill ability for assault rifles, you can get even more use out of the overpowered damage boost. Number 3. Manage your squad positioning. Squad AI and pathing in Mass Effect has never been great, and in ME1 especially, your squad mates can sometimes walk right into harm's way. This is slightly remedied in ME2 and 3, but even then they can still position themselves in less than ideal configurations if you don't manually tell them where to set up behind cover. Especially if your squad is set up to keep following you as you move from cover to cover, they will lag behind slightly or try to reposition themselves away from up-close enemies and end up out of cover more often than not. To avoid this, simply make it a habit to always order each squad mate into cover at the start of each fight. You don't have to micromanage them per se, but it's a good idea to be constantly aware of where your squad mates are at and if they need to be moved from their initial cover spot. Also, for squad mates that are appropriately spec'd out to be a tank, in ME1 that's really just Rex and Ashley, try intentionally moving them out of cover to flank enemies in order to draw their fire. If you followed my previous tips about fitness and armor skill trees for Ashley and Rex, they ought to be able to take a fair amount of damage while you move around to flank the enemy from the opposite side. If Rex is armed with a shotgun and you send him into close range, he'll actually kill an enemy or two all on his own if you let him. If you're an adept or an engineer and not particularly tanky yourself, this can be immensely useful at times. Number 4. Spend points to level up dampening and use it often. The dampening ability can often be overlooked because it's not a real damage dealer as far as abilities go, but it is a powerful debuff ability that can temporarily prevent enemies from using biotic or tech abilities against you. Biotics are incredibly powerful in ME1, and that works for your enemies as well. Being ragdolled by an enemy throw ability can be incredibly frustrating as the animations for your character to get back to their feet are long and drawn out. The best way to avoid this is to stop your enemies from using biotics at all. Dampening does this very effectively, and at upgraded levels will even have an AoE effect to catch multiple biotic enemies in it at once. Especially in the fights at the end of Noveria and Pharos, this can be an essential strategy to deal with particular Asari enemies who are quite powerful. Tali is always my go-to option for a squad mate that can level up dampening, but Garrus is also another good option. Number 5. Keep electronics and decryption high in your squad to access most containers or terminals. Electronics and decryption have their own primary uses, of course, as far as unlocking combat abilities or boosting shields, but outside of combat they also enable you to access the minigame necessary to open locked doors, containers, or terminals, as well as surveying minerals and other finds on uncharted worlds. Whether you're trying to obtain every single upgrade or piece of gear you can, or trying to complete the collection side quests for minerals or rare finds, electronics and decryption will be essential. Earlier in the game or at lower difficulties, this isn't as much of an issue, but in late game or on Insanity, you're going to want every scrap of gear you can find, and sadly, most merchants don't have a wide selection. If you're not an engineer, not to worry because multiple squad mates can upgrade electronics or decryption, so you'll always have an option of who to bring and still be able to get into most secure entries. Number 6. Surveying and scanning every planet is a good way to find minerals and to earn extra credits. The whole premise of Mass Effect is to explore the galaxy, and in Mass Effect 1 this feels the most realized since you can freely choose to drop down onto multiple planets to explore. But also, exploring the galaxy via the galaxy map is a great way to learn more about the planets that you can't land on and also pick up some valuable minerals and artifacts. ME1 has a number of collection side quests that task you with gathering materials and other rare finds, but if you're not the sort to go in for that kind of collecting side quest, you may think surveying planets is a waste of time. However, don't forget that you get a decent amount of credits for surveying these planets also. Each time you make a find on a planet from orbit or ground side, you're rewarded with extra XP and extra credits. While most high-level gear can be found without ever needing to buy it, the best gear in the game, Spectre weapons, can only be purchased from merchants. Since Spectre weapons cost hundreds of thousands of credits, you may need a couple million space bucks to get your team outfitted with a few Spectre weapons of their own. By surveying planets, you'll get a chance to learn about the game's incredible lore and universe, but you'll also be handsomely rewarded. Of course, in ME2, scanning planets takes on a whole new level of importance, because you'll need those rare minerals to fund all of your upgrades for the Normandy, as well as upgrades for your squad's weapons and powers. In all cases, never forget that exploration can help you save the galaxy. So that's it for now, 6 more tips to help you master Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Next up, I'll be doing some quick hit lore and story videos as well as more deep dives on the themes of Mass Effect, so hopefully you'll stick around. This has been The Exalted March. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like button, and if you'd like to be informed of all future videos, please consider hitting the subscribe button and the bell notification. As always, thanks for watching, and thank you for listening.